So today we're talking about domain and range. So functions are often used to describe a relationship between two variables. We've already been talking about that a good bit in class, and we've been developing some vocabulary. So let's start taking a look at this vocabulary. First of all, we have the independent variable. It represents an input value of the function. And then we have the subsequent dependent variable. And when I use the word subsequent, it's meaning something that happens after. So we first have to have an input before we can have an output. Therefore, the dependent variable is waiting fervently for what the independent variable is going to be. Independent variable, dependent variable. What happens here is that the output is dependent upon the input. So more vocab there. Independent variable, dependent variable. So the independent values make up a set of values called the domain. The dependent values make up a set of values that correspond to the input values. They are called the range. Now, the domain is read from the left to the right. The range is going to be read from the bottom to the top. And we're going to practice doing a few of these in this video, and then in class we'll do a whole lot more all together. Now, one thing to remind you is that we are going to use algebraic notation to denote the domain and the range. And once again, I'm reminding you with my arrows, the domain is read from the left to the right, the range is read from the bottom to the top. And if you've got two handy index cards, that's what I'm going to use to help you understand how to find the domain and the range. So first of all, domain, left to right. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use my index card and I'm going to slide until I hit the graph. Now one thing to notice here is that this is not an arrow, but on this side we do have an arrow. So I can't box in an arrow with my index card. So my domain starts, and remember, domain has everything to do with the x-axis, and the range has everything to do with the y-axis. Remember, domain read from the left to the right. So this first point starts at x equals 0. But then it goes to the right, it goes to the right, it goes to the right, and it never stops. That arrow is indicating that it does not stop. And there is no pattern or regularity within this graph. It's just a smooth curve descending and going to the right. So here's what we have. We have a domain that is all real numbers greater than 0. So our x values are greater than or equal to 0. Now let's look at the range. The range is read from the bottom to the top, just like the number line. So first of all, this graph, does it have a bottom? No, because it's got the arrow. But does it have a top? Yes, it does. That solid circle says this is the stopping point. Remember, range is all about the y-axis. So what is our range? From the bottom to the top. Does this graph have a bottom? No. But does it have a top? Yes. What is that top y value? 4. So our y values are less than or equal to 4. The domain, all real numbers greater than or equal to 0. The range, all real numbers less than or equal to 4. One more practice problem here. So one side there's an arrow, one side there is not. So when I try to box in on the left, I can't because of the arrow. But from the right, there is a defined stopping point. So what is our domain here? Our domain, since it has no starting point on the left, will be all real numbers up to and including positive 3. So x is less than or equal to positive 3. What about our range values? Remember, range is read from the bottom to the top. Now, if I try to slide my card up here, I have a defined starting point here, but this arrow is indicating that this graph goes down and to the left forever. So there is no bottom on this graph, but there is a top. Remember, the range has everything to do with the y-axis. So what's the highest y value? It is 1. So our range is all real numbers less than or equal to 1. So that's how we read the domain and the range. Domain, one more time, domain is read from the left to the right. The range is read from the bottom to the top. The domain is the set of independent values. The dependent values make up the range. Domain is all about x, range is all about y.